Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Andy Kind. I'm one of the organisers of this debate. It's a real pleasure to be able to welcome you all here to University Place. We do hope you're going to have a fantastic, challenging evening. It remains for me to introduce to you the moderator for this evening. Our moderator hails originally from Edinburgh in Scotland. He did his first degree there. He did his PhD at Cambridge University. He's been in Manchester since 1977 and is now currently the head of the School of Chemistry. It's a real delight for me to introduce to you Professor Christopher Whitehead, everybody.
Well, thank you, Andy, for that. And can I welcome you all to the University of Manchester, not just those of you in this hall, but those of you upstairs in the overflow. I think it's appropriate in many ways that we should be having a debate of this sort at the University of Manchester. Certainly the founders of the University of Manchester, if we think of people like John Dalton and John Owens, were people who very much thought about issues related to religion and science, and the way in which this institution was founded is very much based on their philosophy in that sort of area. So, just before I tell you how we will organize the debate, let me first of all just introduce to you our two debaters. On my near right, William Lane Craig is Research Professor of Philosophy at Talbot School of Theology in La Mirada, California. He did a PhD at the University of Birmingham here in England before taking a doctorate in theology from the University of Munich. He's a popular international lecturer on university campuses and has authored and edited well over 30 books, including his particular book, Reasonable Faith. And he is a well-known debater on these topics. Peter Atkins is a chemist, British, and a former professor of chemistry at the University of Oxford, and is a fellow of Lincoln College. He is a prolific writer, particularly of chemistry textbooks. His book on physical chemistry was first published in 1978, and my estimate is that even in this university, several thousand students have been taught physical chemistry through that medium, some even perhaps in this audience. But Peter Atkins is also the author of a number of science books for the general public, but is also a well-known atheist. He's spoken and written on issues of humanism, atheism, and the incompatibility of science and religion. So those, ladies and gentlemen, are our two speakers for today. And the way in which we are going to organize the formal part of the debate is as follows. There will be opening presentations by both speakers of 20 minutes. There then will be the first rebuttal by each speaker, and those in turn will be 12 minutes. There will then be the second rebuttal by each speaker, which will be 8 minutes, and then we will have closing statements of 5 minutes. Now, the only thing which I have to do is to ensure that neither of the two gentlemen speaks out of turn, so that will be fine, and that neither of them exceeds by one teeny quotient of time the allotted period. And so we will, after even a second or two of overtime, remove them from the podium. So the first speaker who will start is Professor Craig.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me begin by saying how grateful I am for the invitation to participate in tonight's debate and for Professor Atkins' willingness to join me on the dais. During the years that Jan and I lived in England while I was pursuing my doctoral studies at the University of Birmingham, we came to have a warm affection for this country and her people, and I consider it a real joy and a delight to be here with you tonight. Thank you very much for coming. Now, in tonight's debate, I'm going to defend two basic contentions. First, there are good reasons to think that theism is true, And secondly, there are not comparably good reasons to think that atheism is true. Now, I'll leave it up to Dr. Atkins to present his arguments for atheism before I respond to them. In this opening speech, I want to sketch briefly 3 lines of evidence that weigh in favor of God's existence. As a professional philosopher, I think that God makes sense of a wide range of the data of human experience, including philosophical, scientific, moral, and historical considerations. Number 1, then, the origin of the universe. Have you ever asked yourself where the universe came from? Why anything at all exists rather than nothing? Did the universe have a beginning? Or does it just go back and back forever? Typically, atheists have said that the universe is just eternal and uncaused. But there are good reasons, both philosophical and scientific, to call into question that assumption. Philosophically, the idea of an infinite past is very problematic. If the universe never had a beginning, that means that the number of past events in the history of the universe is infinite. But the real existence of an actually infinite number of things leads to metaphysical absurdities. To give just one example, suppose you had an actually infinite number of coins numbered 1, 2, 3, and so on to infinity. And suppose I took away all the odd-numbered coins. How many coins would you have left? Well, you'd still have all the even-numbered coins, or an infinity of coins. So, infinity minus infinity is infinity. But now suppose instead that I took away all the coins numbered greater than 3. Now how many coins would you have left? 3. So, infinity minus infinity is 3. In each case, I took away an identical number of coins from an identical number of coins and came up with contradictory results. In fact, you can subtract infinity from infinity and get any result, from 0 to infinity. For this reason, inverse operations like subtraction and division are simply prohibited in transfinite arithmetic. But in the real world in which we live, such a convention has no sway. Obviously, you can give away any coins that you want. Here's another example of the absurdity of an infinite past. Take the planets Jupiter and Saturn. Suppose that for every orbit that Saturn completes around the Sun, Jupiter completes 2. If Saturn has completed 10 orbits, Jupiter has completed 20. If Saturn has completed 1 trillion, Jupiter has completed 2 trillion. The longer they orbit, the further Saturn falls behind. If they continue to orbit forever, then they will approach a limit at which Saturn will be infinitely far behind Jupiter. But now turn the story around. Suppose that Jupiter and Saturn have been orbiting the Sun from eternity past. Now, which will have completed the most number of orbits? The correct mathematical answer is that the number of their orbits is identical. But that seems absurd. For the longer they orbit, the further the disparity between them grows. So how does the number of their orbits magically become identical just by making them orbit from eternity past? These and many other examples suggest that infinity is just an idea in your mind, not something that exists in reality. But that entails that since past events are not just ideas in your mind, but are real, the number of past events must be finite. Therefore, the series of past events can't go back and back forever. Rather, the universe must have begun to exist. This purely philosophical conclusion has been confirmed by remarkable discoveries in astronomy and astrophysics. We now have pretty strong evidence that the universe is not eternal in the past, but had an absolute beginning a finite time ago. In 2003, Arvin Bord, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin were able to prove that any universe which is on average in a state of cosmic expansion cannot be infinite in the past, but must have a past space-time boundary. What makes their proof so powerful is that it holds regardless of the physical description of the early universe. Because we don't yet have a quantum theory of gravity, we can't yet provide a physical description of the first split second of the universe. But the Bord-Guth-Vilenkin theorem holds independently of any physical description of that moment. Their theorem implies that the quantum state of the early universe, the quantum vacuum state, that is to say, which some scientific popularizers have misleadingly and inaccurately characterized as nothing, cannot be eternal in the past, but must have an absolute beginning. Even if our universe is just a tiny part of a wider multiverse composed of many universes, their theorem implies that the multiverse itself must have a beginning. Now, of course, highly speculative scenarios, such as loop quantum gravity models, string models, even closed time-like curves, have been suggested to try to avoid this absolute beginning. Although all of these models are fraught with problems, the bottom line is that none of these theories, even if true, succeeds in restoring an eternal past. At the very most, they just push the beginning back a step. But then the inevitable question arises: why did the universe come into being? What brought the universe into existence? Some intrepid atheists have asserted that the universe just popped into being uncaused out of nothing. But surely that's metaphysically impossible. For as Professor Atkins himself points out, nothingness or non-being has no properties, no powers, no potentialities. It therefore cannot produce anything. Moreover, if something could come into being out of nothing, then it's inexplicable why just anything and everything doesn't come into being from nothing. Why is it only universes that pop into being out of nothing? What makes nothingness so discriminatory? Finally, the idea that the universe could come into being from nothing is, in the words of philosopher of science Bernhard Kanitscheider, in head-on collision with the most successful ontological commitment in the history of science, namely the principle that out of nothing, nothing comes. So, why does the universe exist instead of just nothing? Where did it come from? There must have been a transcendent cause which brought the universe into being.